I'm really happy they brought those chairs up. For a minute there, I thought we were going to be sitting around campfire style. We're here to talk about employee engagement for the mission. Michael, you teed us up very well, I thought, in that. So maybe just to get us off the ground, if each of you could give us a quick overview of how you define employee engagement and where you're at right now in the process. Maybe we'll start with Camille at the far.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me here today. So when I think about employee engagement, as the senior leader for my organization, and for all leaders, I think it is critical that we take care of the people of the organization, that we create and we sustain a work environment where they can flourish. And that means that they have the tools and the resources they need to do their job, that creativity and innovation is rewarded. But it also means that there are standards and accountabilities, and that the environment is respectful, diverse, and inclusive. And so you need those 4 pillars in order to really have an environment where your employees can flourish. And so every leader has to have a vision. You have the core values that you want to emulate, but what's most important is how do you translate that onto the front line? It cannot just be lofty goals that you talk about or put on a poster at a new employee orientation. You have to find ways on a daily basis to make sure that that is the environment that the people that are doing the work day in and day out truly believe is there.
Very good. I think thank you for having me here, and thank you for allowing me to talk about that. I'm the deputy chico, so I'm the number 2 in my organization, and I agree to that. I think that you need to have a mission and vision that employees can get behind. But I also think what is harder is you have to make sure that you, on a daily basis, are listening to what the employees want. Get that feedback, whether it's through PHEVs. What we did is we had a value survey, and we said, what do you want? And what are values to you? And then we have to follow that up. And so we're doing that now, and we're following that up is what is important to you? And what they said is the number 1 is 33% is respect. And it's two-way respect. Respect me as an employee, and I'll respect you as a leader, but respecting is a two-way cycle. And then what we also find is that there's little things. The workplace flexibilities are important. Work-life balance is important. So listening to those. So we also took it a step further is a workplace culture advisor that advises the secretary, the assistant secretary, our assistant secretary of policy management and budget to infuse that into the culture. So we're into the implementation and assessing phase. So we're assessing that and starting to implement that throughout our environment, because I think you can have these pillars of respect and those types of things, but then it's the follow through with that. We heard you, and then now we need to implement that. So that's kind of what we're looking at now at the Department of the Interior. So we're assessing that, and we just got our PHEVs information back, and we think that it's a lot more positive than last year, but we've got a lot of work to do, and so that's where we're at the Department of the Interior.
Kind of difficult to improve on those descriptions. I kind of reflect back personally during the course of my career to the time I was given my first supervisory role. And I can remember I was a fairly junior guy in the Department of the Navy, and thought, man, today is the day it has finally come when I have a team here to work for me to try to accomplish the mission and the goals. And it was a little while before the switch went off to realize that I needed to really flip that paradigm, and that they weren't there to work for me, but that I was there to work for them. And I think that that's probably the most plain language description I can give of employee engagement, is for leaders to recognize that we are there to work in service of the federal employees that we are given the honor of leading. And so we too at the Department of the Treasury have been greatly encouraged by the preliminary results from this year's Viewpoint Survey. I think that we were fighting an uphill battle, considering some of the environmental factors that we were up against throughout the course of the last year. But it is really that commitment to mission that I think helps carry people through, and our commitment to communicating consistently about their value in contributing to achievement of that mission. So I think we're in a very solid place right now at the Department of the Treasury, and very glad to be there.
Well, the 3 great answers there, so there's not much I can add to that, but I would definitely want to build on what we said about respect for employees and having that regular communication between employees and supervisors, so that you can really just sort of unlock that sense of purpose that employees have about the mission of their organization. And when you do that, you really see the sense of dedication and commitment that employees have to the work that they're doing. I like to sort of compare the work we do in this area to a garden. You have to constantly water the garden. You have to sometimes pull some weeds, and plant new flowers. But employee engagement, I think, is really a conversation of mutual respect and commitment to a mission.
Great. I want to talk a little bit about the data piece. I'm sure you're all using PHEVs Data, or at least won't admit that you're using it in front of Michael. But how exactly are you using it, and are you going beyond it in other ways to measure engagement? And Camille, I understand you're doing some interesting things with data.
Absolutely. So at NIDDK, the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, which is the institute at NIH that I work in, FEVS is a treasure trove of information about what the people of the organization think, about their leaders, their work units, and it tells us where we're doing well and where we can improve. But it is a mountain of data. And so at NIDDK, we actually created a tool called EBS Art, and it is an extraordinary tool. The creator is here in the audience, Robin Clevens. And in 5 simple steps, in literally 5 minutes, you have an entire report with dashboards, heat maps, a deeper dive, and you're hearing the voice of the people. It tells you the themes of where you're doing well. And so when you talk about low value to high value work, instead of analysts throughout all the agencies working tirelessly for weeks and months, you now have a report in 5 minutes, and you can get a report for any level organization that has 10 or more. And so now the people of the organization can focus on what are the targeted interventions, what are the strategic initiatives that we really want to focus on as a group. And we use the PHEVs data year round. We don't just focus on it when we're trying to get participation or when the results come out now. We have a campaign year round. You spoke, we listened, things happen. And every time we create a new initiative, a new policy, a way to make the people of the organization feel that they're getting more meaningful rewards, whatever it is that we're working on, we tie it back constantly. And I have to say, a question that is a very low scoring question, which is the question about, I believe the results of this survey will make my workplace a better organization. Across government in 2018, that score was 41%, and that score in 2018 for NIDDK is 74%. So we are able to have remarkable, and you can see from year to year, using our beautiful tool, how we have focused and we have measurable results of how we were able to affect change. And we're gifting it. It's created by feds, for feds. It's free to anyone. We train, we do custom sessions. We have it up on the max.gov site. So we're more than happy. We've been to more than 80 agencies, gifting it to them and helping them learn how to use it.
Great. Jennifer, how are you using?
So similar, we had, you said we did, that was our campaign, and what our employees said is we have, on average, employees at the Department of the Interior, they love being at the Department of Interior. They on average stay there 14 years, so I don't know how that's comparable to other agencies, but what they want to do is they want to stay there, but they want to do different things, and they wanted to know, how can I stay here but do something a little bit differently? So we just launched on October 1st on DOI Careers, which is public to everybody, an automated career pathing. And it shows it's the majority of our, it's 20 of our mission critical occupations and 4 of our high density occupation, which is more than 50% of our workforce. Eventually we'll do all of our careers, but we have 350 occupations in 2004 and 2,400 areas in the US. So what we did is we wanted to show how do you get from A to B in a nonlinear fashion, because sometimes people are superintendents of parks, and they didn't get there by starting out as just a GS4 park ranger to be, and so it's nonlinear in a lot of cases. We probably didn't get to our jobs by starting out as just like for me, an HR specialist. I was a Army Medical Service Corps officer, so that's probably not traditional. So we have video vignettes on how they became where they are, and then what you can do is a quiz, and then it shows the competencies, and then we link it to USA Jobs. So this is 1.0, and then eventually we want to get to the Apple 11.0. So, and then the first day that we launched it, we had over 9,000 hits. And it was the most hits we've had in over 2 years on DOI Careers. So, and this is what we mean to say is we're listening to what our employees wanted. Another thing that we have is we have a lot of detail opportunities. On our intranet, we have where managers can post detail opportunities. In fact, we have somebody here that's in our office that's from another bureau that's detailed to our office, because what people want is they want opportunities to do career enhancing opportunities that's not necessarily another job, but I want that skill set to learn, whether it's a department level opportunity or just a budget opportunity. And what's great about that, in other agencies, they don't allow that. So we've had over 150 detail opportunities in just this year alone. Supervisors allow that. They allow their employees to go have detail opportunities somewhere else. Employees have expressed that through the PHEVs, and so we are allowing that. So those are key things that we've done. To get to the performance management, and this is something that, Michael, you mentioned, is we used to have a 5-level opportunities. Everybody knows that the 2-level opportunity kind of keeps employees in limbo because you really can't, they're not passing their performance and they're not failing necessarily. So we eliminated the level 2. And so now we have a 4-level performance management. Of course, everybody that's in HR knows that it's very challenging to change your performance management system. And we're also automating it. Right now we're launching the automation, the automated performance management, launching it to 42,000 people. So those were things that we listened to with our workforce, and we're implementing those throughout. So while it's not necessarily a dashboard, we'd like to leverage that from you, but we're listening to our employees what they need, and these are big muscle moves, and we're communicating that to our workforce. But I do encourage you to go to DOI Careers and look at what we have, and then maybe keep visiting as we enhance that. Thank you.
Sure. In the current environment, let's just say there are a fair number of distractions for federal employees, from political dysfunction to shutdowns and furloughs. I'm interested in hearing from each of you, and maybe you can start us off, Michael, about what kind of impact that has had on engagement, and how does that make the challenge of keeping employees engaged even bigger?
Well, I think especially employees that are working here in the DC area, I think they're kind of used to the environment that we are in here. We've sort of been in this kind of contentious environment for a while now. Obviously, I think the volume has turned up a little bit very recently, but only about a third of the workforce is actually in the DC area. When we rolled out the President's Management Agenda, we went to Kansas City, partly to demonstrate that 2/3 of the federal workforce is outside of DC. And the numbers that we've seen from the sort of preliminarily from the PHEV survey is that the engagement numbers are holding steady or slightly improved. And I think the importance of what we've talked about earlier about making sure that employees feel engaged, that they feel ownership of the work that they're doing, and that they're focused on the mission, I think are most important. I don't think most employees are distracted by sort of what's going on around them, because the work that's directly in front of them is what they're there for and what they are most interested in doing.
Trevor, everybody loves the IRS, so I'm sure this isn't an issue for you.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely spot on. In looking at our preliminary results, excuse me, from this year, when we look at Treasury-wide results, those are hugely colored by the IRS's results. They comprise roughly 80+% of our workforce, and a very, very small percentage of the IRS employee population is in the Washington, D.C. area. They are out there providing services to the American people. And frankly, they were one of the groups that was most severely impacted by the government shutdown. And yet, we see roundly that we have either held the line or increased our scores across the full spectrum of indices from PHEVs this year. And so we have some work to do to go out there and try to find out kind of what is at play with the employees in the field. But I was really, frankly, surprised at the results relative to employee engagement Treasury-wide, which again is so colored by that segment of our workforce. So I think that your point is absolutely spot on.
No, I agree on both accounts. I think most of our employees are outside the DC area, and they're focused on the mission. I think it's in DC we're focused on the distractions, and when we have a lot of meetings, and we try to focus our meetings on other sites, and unless we do a data call of some type, they're really focused on their day-to-day operations, which is refreshing. And I think if all of you go out to your other locations, there's a sense of zen when you go out there. And actually, we're going to do a town hall with our senior leaders, and we're going to invite people from other locations to call in to make sure that we're inclusive of those other locations. So I do think that it is just more refreshing when you're including those other ones, because I think the DC office tends to be more of the distraction a little bit, and then they're the ones that get the work done.
Yeah. You've got in your department kind of a specific issue with Bureau of Land Management moving their headquarters. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of disruption? Does that create an engagement challenge?
We are engaging them, and they're moving out there as it is planned now. And there's just a lot of activity going on with that event. So that's what I would say to that. And it just gets them closer to their state offices. Mm-hmm.
Great.
It's a good question.
So, I think about our federal workforce, and they do have such pride in what they do. And anyone you talk to that's a Fed, they want to make a difference. And that's really what it's all about, and that's why they come, and that's why they stay. And so it isn't to say that there aren't anxieties when there's a threat of a shutdown or these other things that are going on, but I think what's most important is that while that's in the background, we continue to do things to make sure the people of the organization know that we are communicating with them, we are telling them what's happening in real time, they see senior leaders engaged and involved, and that we continue to keep doing things to try to help them grow and develop, and we don't get distracted with the engagement activities we're doing just because of the noise in the background. So for instance, at NIDDK, we've created many novel programs. We have a program for our junior professionals just starting out in government, the Developing Professionals program. We put in place a mentor program. Everybody knows that mentors are important, and you need mentors throughout your career, but you would be shocked how many of your average work employee doesn't know how to go about doing it. They don't know how to find a mentor, and who's going to want to talk to me that's in a leadership role, and will my supervisor allow me time? We actually just created a simple framework so that we could bring them together, we could launch them, we could help them know how to interview people, we could say what would be a successful engagement. And the amount of lift and resources was quite small, and yet we're helping to further people's careers. And we're helping them to know that they matter to us enough that this is an important program that we're offering them. And so if you keep doing things like that, even with all the noise in the background, it helps them know that the organization cares, and they already have the passion. So you're just able to help that stay stable.
Michael, at OPM itself, is it more of a challenge these days on the engagement front, given that there are some questions about the future of the agency itself?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, we've looked at our preliminary numbers, and they're holding steady or slightly improved from where they were last year. And I think a lot of that is attributable to how much agency leadership was really engaging with the workforce, being open and transparent about the conversations, about what the proposal for OPM meant for them. We had a number of town halls. The acting director had office hours. I spent a lot of time walking around the building with our chief management officer, just stopping and visiting different program areas and offices, just talking one-on-one with employees. What we got out of those conversations is that the mission still matters. That was the message that we were conveying, and that employees were telling us back. The work that OPM employees are doing still needs to be done, regardless of how the sort of boxes on the org chart are organized. That work continues. The healthcare we provide continues. The retirement services that we provide to employees will continue. And the strategic human capital work that we need to be doing needs to be elevated so that we have more people, a greater percentage of our sort of attention and resources are focused on that important work. And that's the message we were conveying, and I think that sort of cut through a lot of the other reporting that was out there that was really not based on what the agency plans were.
I want to ask about the relationship between engagement and organizational culture. Have you, each of you, come across situations where your survey results or your interactions with employees made you think we have a culture problem here? And if so, how do you address that kind of thing? Camille, maybe you can start us off.
Sure. So I can tell you, using the EVS ART tool, I mean, you can clearly see across organizations, and you can see where the pain points are. You might not know what's, is it a transformation that's going on? Is it a leadership problem? Is it, you can see themes that are going across the entire organization so that you would do something more strategic. But there definitely are places where there will be a culture problem. And for me, it may very well be that they are not lined up with the bigger, larger culture that we're trying to create and sustain. And so in that case, you do a targeted intervention and you work to understand more fully. So I had an organization that was underperforming. It was forward-facing with all 1,300 employees in the organization, and there was a vote of no confidence. So what do you do to turn that around? Well, it was very intentional, and it was a targeted, multi-pronged approach to change out leaders if they weren't going to embrace the new vision, teach the supervisors what the expectations were for supervisors, talk to the people of the organization, put in measurable metrics and benchmarks so that there are standards and accountabilities that you're putting in place in a fair way so that everybody understands what's expected. And over time, and also take your high performers and make sure they're getting opportunities. Teach, we went in and literally taught and did role playing with how you have constructive conversations, because a lot of times supervisors don't know how to have difficult conversations, and they put it off. And what you often find is mediocrity is acceptable and there's no consequences for poor performance. Oftentimes in the underperforming organizations, that's part of the problem. And so we set a standard that that's no longer acceptable. But then you have to roll out a program in a way that doesn't feel punitive and yet can make the people of the organization embrace the change and what's moving forward. And to Michael's question, the lowest question in government about poor performers are dealt with in my organization. So I know that across government, in 2018, that score was 32%. In 2018, for NIDDK, it's 66%. And if you go from 15 on, you see every year our scores go up. And one, it's because we have done targeted interventions, and the whole organization, the whole institute sees that that organization is improving. So right there, they're getting important messages because they're seeing an organization turn around where they're meeting metrics and they're better customer service and there's forged relationships now. So they're seeing that, and then across the entire institute, we're doing things to make sure there's standards and accountabilities and fairness. And I think between the two, the people of the organization believe it, and you are seeing it reflected in our scores, which really is proof of concept that year after year, our scores continue to go up.
Do you make that data public so that essentially organizations can see how they're comparing against other organizations within your organization?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, when the results come out and we create the reports, the institute director sends the overall NIDDK report out to the entire institute, and then I give a report out to every organization with 10 or more people. We go out, we have conversations and meetings with the people of the organization. We focus on, we've done all these things to improve, for instance, meaningful recognition, and that's still a lower score. What are other opportunities? What are actionable ways that you believe as an employee will make a difference? Because part of it is you've got to translate it. We can have all these lofty ideas in our mind, but if it's not meaningful to the people of the organization, then you constantly miss it. So related to that, we are regularly using ideation tools, doing phone surveys. We had a town hall meeting with 120 people. We made them pull out their phones and vote on what's the most meaningful non-monetary way that they could be recognized. And one of the top ways was a handwritten thank you note. That is so simple. And it was one of the highest scoring things. Okay, it's only 120 people, but you know what? You've just found a really effective way to, in real time, be able to make people feel more appreciated. So that's having your finger on the pulse and making sure, especially if you're a senior leader, as a senior leader, you cannot get out to all the people of the organization. So you need ambassadors on the front line. You need your frontline supervisors and managers to emulate your lofty goals and to embrace your vision, and they have to go forth for you. And that's a key to keeping the organization engaged and taking a lot of the things you're talking about that you're doing at the HR level and translating it out to the people of the organization.
Jennifer, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say on culture, I think it's important that we recognize that PHEVs is a point-in-time survey and that it has a lot of value in these long longitudinal views. But tools and technology, and I am the amen corner for EVSR. I mean, it has really been transformational and allowed us to move to higher value work in HR. And one of the higher value propositions, I think, is to identify kind of microcultures within organizations. When we look at these big organizational results, there are a lot of voices that get lost in the law of large numbers. And I think back to the time I was working at the Department of Justice, and many of our litigating components at DOJ had tremendous employee engagement. Those lawyers got the biggest kick in the world out of standing up in court and saying, I'm here representing the United States of America. I think that at that time, the ratio of lawyers to paralegals was 10 to 1. And so if you only looked at the organizational results, that 10% might get lost. So those lawyers were highly engaged, but the legal support staff may not have been so engaged. So we, I think, have to be careful about breaking our arms by patting ourselves on the back for these organizational results that we see, and that tools and technology will allow us to turn our attention towards developing more frequent interactions with employees, whether it's pulse surveys, telephone surveys, town hall meetings with real-time back and forth, but also to pay close attention to different segments of the workforce, not only organizationally, but as the leader, I think, of Treasury's HR community. What is the HR workforce culture? What is the culture of different age cohorts in the workforce? The millennial cohort, the Generation X cohort, et cetera. And we have the data. We have the ability to parse it that way. What we don't always have is the bandwidth and the time Because if we're locked away producing reports and visualizations of data manually, then that really robs us of the ability to get to the greater insights that I think have the ability to help us be really transformational on culture.
Jennifer, you've got in your department a lot of agencies with pretty widely varying missions. Does that create a culture challenge?
So, good points on both ends, and I think to your question and to your point, we do. We have, and when we stood up our transformational office, we stood up a policy because there was a lot of intergenerational issues within our agency, and that was based on feedback from previous PHEVs surveys, and then we did our value survey. And so what we realized is we needed a policy on how to have respect for each other, and it's not just the EEO, but it's intergenerational, because we have people in different locations that are of different age, different races, different generations, and so what we found out is that 93% know of this policy. And that was great, because sometimes you just need to know that there's this policy, and then 83% of managers and employees know what to do about this. And so then now we're training people on this intergenerational training and this bystander training. And then we're going to make some of this mandatory. And I know that that's just a first step, because sometimes training, you just sit through the training, but we're doing this in-person training, and we're doing it throughout our different locations, because I do think that there are different types of populations that we need to address. There's the under 40 training, the under 40 population. There's different races, different populations that we need to address. So we are getting out in the workforce to make sure that people are listened to with this, and we're taking it from a leadership standpoint. So we have politicals going out with our workforce culture advisor, and our CLO is going out there. So I guess to your point is, we do need to pay attention to different people, and not just say, here's a survey, we're just going to leave it in the books, but we're listening to our workforce about that. So that's one thing that we're doing, and we were very pleased with those results, to say they know of the policy. We do hand that out on onboarding, and we make people read it, and we have them sign it. We kind of sit there while they read it, because we do think that respect, and that they understand that we have that policy in place, that treat people with respect, and they understand that. And we do have ways to go, but I think that was positive results in that, yeah.
I think we have time for a couple of questions, so raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you. Up here in front.
Where's our microphone, folks?
It's coming.
Thank you. What kind of things are your agencies doing to try to improve recruitment, hiring, and retention of younger people, students, recent graduates, and so forth?
So I'm happy to take that one for a start. Is we did launch the DOI Careers, so people can actually see video vignettes of what it's like to be in the certain careers, our mission critical occupations and our high density occupations. So that is on our public site, because we wanted to share that to attract younger people, or people of all ages. Actually, we want to attract anybody that is interested in that, because we do want to make sure that we're opening it up to all people. The other thing to that question is, we have asked for, working with OPM, receive direct hire authority for our wildland fire, and we are working for some other direct hire authorities. So that allows us to have a little bit more broader opportunities to get in different, having direct hire authority, if everybody's familiar with what direct hire authority is. So that we do want to encourage people to apply to the Department of the Interior at all levels. Of course, we have the regular pathway program, and then we have obviously other direct hire authorities.
Yep.
Yeah.
While I have an audience here,
Yeah.
the Deputy Director of OPM, I will speak on behalf of my Chico Council colleagues. to kind of trumpet the work that we have recently been doing in trying to develop recommendations for pathways reform. I was kind of an elected ringleader of this group, and we looked at the data between 2012 and 2017, I believe. Out of a workforce of over 2 million people, we hired just over 17,500 people under Pathways authorities. Personally, I think that the programs were really well-intentioned, but were developed in a way that was difficult to understand, difficult to explain, difficult to utilize fully in the way that we had hoped. And so we are really putting our shoulders behind this effort to try to come up with a much simpler way to reach people who are current students, recent graduates, high potential people like presidential management fellows. The thing that I would say, though, is that we had better modernize. And it's, the deputy director's point was well taken in his opening comments, and that is, we manage our lives in a much different way than we manage our work. And when we start reaching these people who are currently in school and who come to us with the expectation that they will be given tools to conduct their work in the same way that they live their lives, I think that we fall far short of that today. And so I think it is up to each of us to be thinking about how we can transform the way that our employees are able to provide services to the American people. You'll hear a lot about robotic process automation and the increased tempo of AI adoption. We're doing some work at Treasury now. I just partnered with the Human Capital Officer at the IRS to purchase enterprise level training for all 100,000 or so Treasury employees in data literacy and digital readiness, just so that we can start getting up to speed in those areas to prepare people for the way that work will be done. But we need, as a government, to really focus, I think, on providing people those kind of tools that they're going to expect of us as an employer.
So I'll just add to what you all are saying at a more grassroots level. At the NIH, we heavily use pathways. I mean, the institutes are just waiting for those pathway certs to come out, and we are competing with each other for the students that are coming in. So HHS as well is using it. As a matter of fact, I am part of a group at HHS that is doing a targeted approach to HBCUs to go out and to meet with these colleges and universities across the country, and we are bringing them in virtually, and we are hand walking them through what is the pathways, what are the 3 ways you can do it, how do you write your resume, why is it important to be public service. We talk about all of the different agencies we have, and we've only done like 4 of these, but we are doing more and more every month. And it's grassroots. It's not at the high level you're talking about, but it's taking the tools we have today and doing everything we can to bring in the bright young people for the future.
I should say, relative to that pathways reform effort too, that OPM has been a tremendous partner to the Chico Council in bringing their policy expertise to the table at the front end and not letting us cast about trying to develop things that can't happen. So we have been very fortunate to have the benefit of Kim Holden and her team in those discussions. So thank you so much for allowing them to be supportive of that effort.
I have to say, yes, thank you for the recent initiatives lately with Kim and the team there.
Thank you. I'll bring that back.
Great. Well, I think we've covered a fair amount of ground here, and we've reached the end of our time, so please join me in thanking the panel.